Hi guys, it's Professor Fernandez. I'm here for this particular lesson to teach you how to take your research statement and turn it into a research question. Essentially, this is part two of what you learned in your honor seminar. Now, if you didn't go to the honor seminar, I am not going to repeat what you missed. So I'll ask the powers that be um, if they recorded the Zoom meeting, and I will pop it in there as soon as I possibly can. But for this particular lesson, I'm going to go through it. There's a PowerPoint presentation, and we'll go through it. It's not meant to be long, but it is meant for you guys to ask questions. So, when you do ask questions, please send them to me. Some of you, or actually, as part of this week's module work, you have to set up some office hours with me to have a discussion about your project. So please bring your questions to the office hours and we'll have a great conversation. All right. As always, screen share. And as part of the screen share, you get to see my desktop, my yoga frogs. They make me so happy. Okay, let's talk about this wonderfulness here. Um, so this is actually so let me give you a little background on the research question situation. I noticed during honor seminar last week um, that uh, the research statement that made you put together actually was a really good part one. And I had part two in an old lesson that I did years ago. I don't do that lesson now, mostly because it's a huge lesson. It's a lesson I would do for a 1301 or even a 1302 face to face. And it's literally 2 weeks worth of a lesson, right? It's one PowerPoint with 2 weeks worth of stuff. So I just took the important parts of that particular lesson and dump them in here, and then tweak them. So you'll get to see a little bit of that particular lesson if you actually ever see it. There may be some former students who have it. It's called How to Write a Research Paper Like a Boss. Um, I may bring it back. I may resurrect it. Let's go ahead and get started. You're gonna need the research statement that you need, and we'll review how to do that research statement. I have a little tweak to it that may be helpful. Um, but we're not going to work on the research statement in this. So if you haven't done the research statement and weren't at the seminar on the 29th, you could do one of two things. You can wait until I get a copy of that and put it in the class, or you can go through this into the when I kind of review the how to do a research statement, stop the video and then do the research statement and then continue on. I want you to have read and looked through some literary pieces. You have a lot of literary pieces at your disposal. Not only do you have the entire book, the entire King book, of which you can do all sorts of things with this, but you also have readings for the semester. And remember, it's anything that's in that folder and or anything written by anyone who's in that folder, right? So it's very open. You're not very limited here, which could be a positive thing or a negative thing. So um, I want you to note here the research statement in question comes from the pieces, not the subject. So if you're thinking, I want to do something about the civil rights movement, okay, well, this is not history class. This is English. So you have to look at the pieces. Maybe you look at the pieces from the civil rights movement, and that will kind of instruct you on where to go next. So it's very important that you don't come into this process and don't come in to your office hours with me saying, I want to do this as the topic. I'm going to look at you and say, what do you want me to do with that? There's nothing I can do with that. This is not a class where you pick a topic and go for it, right? This is a class where the pieces, the literature is going to inform you. right? Because it all comes down to this. It is not a research paper where you're going to say, I want to do stuff about the gay rights movement, and you're going to get like literally dump a bunch of information on the piece of paper saying, this is my project in the gay rights movement. That's not how this works, right? So the pieces are going to lead you, which is important why you go through some of these pieces, even if you don't quite understand them. My part is to help you understand them, and help you through the process of understanding them through how we're learning in class. Okay. So let's review this assignment here. The assignment is in week one, um, and the assignment Dropbox will be up soon. But you can go back and read the assignment sheet. It's 10 to 15-page literary analysis. I don't want 20 pages. Let's cut it off at 15, right? We talked about this at the beginning of the semester. Again, any piece on the list or a piece from anyone on the list. Um, you must investigate social issues, and I wrote social issues, but really it's about social justice. This whole class is about social justice and the literary aspects of it. And what that means is how the argument is made. Arguments can be made through the literary aspects. This is like your foreshadowing, all your literary terms, plot devices, characterization, all that stuff, right? Um, Rhythm, rhyme, all those literary aspects. And it can also be made through rhetorical devices like writer's purpose and context and topic. So that all is encompassed there. Again, you get a lot of freedom in this one, which is a good thing and bad thing sometimes. So we're focusing primarily on poems, speeches, short stories, essays, song lyrics. Because song lyrics can be poems. Talk to me about song lyrics during your one-on-one with me. And it's 8 to 10 sources minimum. You can go over, but talk to me before you do it, because I'm not really interested that you hit 8 to 10 sources minimum. I'm interested that you are hitting 8 to 10, 12, 13, 14 really quality sources. Completely different, right? So, a couple things also to remember: you're picking your own topic and it's literature based. So, that's why I'm saying the pieces will set you free. Um, it's better if you pick several or one that's big in general, but not too general, to give you room to figure things out. You're at the point right now that you're at the beginning of this process, right? So, the research process really begins with a question, it begins with curiosity, and then as you research, you are finessing what you're doing. You're finessing that question. So you're going to have big broad things, big broad subjects, and that's perfectly fine. I'm going to teach you the difference between a topic and a subject, however, because it's important to understand and realize this. This is not your first research paper in the honors college. It won't be your last. If you go on to a 4 year school or go on to do graduate work, it's the same process except with higher stakes. So you need to understand kind of the difference between a subject and a topic. A subject is something that's very, very broad. It's the universe. It's the world, right? And then the topic is something very specific. So if I were to say football's not a topic, it's a subject. Because under football, you can have players, you can have salary, you can have uniforms, you can have um, Airgate, right? You can have JJ Watt and our quarterback, Chunk and Deuce leaving the Texans. So those are all more specific than just football, right? So if you're coming to me and saying, I want to talk about civil rights and the civil rights movement and the literature of the civil rights movement, that's really big and broad. We're just learning about Dr. King, and he's just one person who was writing things and doing social activism in the 60s. But you also had Medgar Evers who was doing work. You also had Rosa Parks that was doing work. You also have many people who were not directly part of the movement, but supported the movement, who were doing work. So try to make it a little bit more general. Maybe you're talking more about women in the civil rights movement. Maybe you're talking about how other movements were inspired. Oh, excuse me, just something just fell off my desk. Um, other how other movements were inspired by the civil rights movement. I mean, that's a little bit more specific than just civil rights, right? So here is an example of what I'm talking about. Especially since we were talking about Dr. King all semester, you're going to come up with this topic of disenfranchisement. It's almost as not almost, it is in everything he talks about, the disenfranchisement of the African and American community, or the Black community during the 50s and 60s, right? In the heat of the civil rights movement. He talks about this, but disenfranchisement can mean lots of things. It could be about economic development of the African American community, the political leadership of the LGBT community. It could talk about um, job opportunities, um, educational opportunities. You could talk. It could be board versus brown versus board. It could be um, Prop 6 in San Francisco. Um, so disenfranchisement has many shades, right? So you need to understand that something like disenfranchisement is a subject, but economic development, you know, of the African American community is a specific topic within disenfranchisement. That's the big difference between subject versus topic. So be specific enough to where you're not talking about the world, the earth, the moon, and the stars, but you're talking about maybe a certain planet, right? That's where we need to be right now. We don't need to be so zeroed in on a topic quite yet, um, but you need to be within the ballpark, right? So, um, a couple of things you need to understand, and hopefully by now you've read the lesson on topic and what that is. If not, then you should do it. This kind of talks about topic a little bit. Each of the pieces that you're reading this semester, all of them are about social justice, and they have more than one topic. They talk about more than one thing, right? Dr. King's Facing the Challenges of a New Age talks about inequality, growing leadership, acceptance of violence as part of the movement. You guys missed that, by the way. Reading your Padlets. You guys missed that. He said it. He said it in 2 lines. Y'all glossed over. Granted, he said it as it was sandwiched between two big wonderful things, but he actually said it, right? So yeah, the acceptance that violence is going to have to be part of the movement. At some point we're going to have to be violent, but we don't want to get there unless we have to get there. Law and an open dialogue of to end race. All these, you see all this listed here on this slide. All of these are topics that he touched on in that one essay. One, like we haven't even talked about Eudora Whitley and how many things she's touched in that short story that you guys read, the very first thing that you guys read. So you see how there's topics here, and understanding topic helps you kind of think about, well, I want to talk about the pieces. And if Professor Fernandez is saying that the pieces are going to can color, should color kind of what I want to talk about, then what I need to do is read these pieces with new eyes and look at the topics they are addressing. Because if facing the challenges of a new age is addressing the topic of hope, the hope speech also addresses that topic. So here's another example here. Leadership. Leadership is a subject. And so under leadership, leadership, Dr. King was talking about that in the essay. He was talking about homegrown leadership, honest leadership, visionary leadership. Those things are very specific. So topics are more specific. They help you create a research statement, um, of which is important. We're going to talk about how to do that really quick. And then from the statement, we'll go into the question. So, again, research statements gets you in the ballpark, right? It's not your entire research, it's really like a mission statement, right? If you do that research statement that was shown during the honor seminar, it's really something one of the professors said you can literally put it up on a wall, and as you're researching, that's kind of your guide. And so yeah, that's your mission statement, right? And so it focuses on your interest and it focuses on the why of your research, other than it's required as a member of the honors college. Um, but the fact that it focuses on the why of your research opens it up completely. You may have been very used to just getting a topic and you do research and you slap it on the page and you're done. But the why is as important as the content in that paper. So let's review the research statement. I am not going to do anything too terribly different from what Professor Barr did and Dr. X. Um, so you're going to fill in the blank, right? Fill in the blank of the statement. I am interested in blank because blank, period. I want to help others understand blank. You just fill that in, right? So it's something like, I am interested in, um, I am interested in um, how victims and heroes of social justice are immortalized because um, those are the true foot soldiers of social activism. I want to help others understand that social justice doesn't only happen in a courtroom or in a march. It also happens um, in literature and is passed down, right? So that's the statement, right? That's an example of the statement. Um, and that kind of focus you a little bit for the next thing. It focus you on creating a question because the whole point of research is that you're answering that question. Here's another example, and another example of this research statement here. I am interested in Afrofuturism literature because it raises questions of equality in a thought-provoking way. I want to help others understand how Black storytellers envision the future, thus exposing the social justice work still left to do. Boom, right? That kind of gives you a guide. So I'm looking at this as a professor and I'm already thinking, all right, you're going to go into Afrofuturism literature. We're going to go into Afrofuturism literature in week 4. It's coming up very quickly. We're going to read something called The Comet by W.E.B. Du Bois. Um, it's one of the oldest, one of the older Afrofuturism stories. There are newer Afrofuturism stories, but again, if you're interested in this literature, that's why you talk to the professor. I can give you way more people. Um, so I'm looking at it, so I know that this is going to be this type of literature. I know that you're looking at how equality is being played out in this type of literature, and that you're looking at not only equality in Afrofuturism, but how and what they're saying about the work that still needs to be done for equality um, in real life, IRL, right? So that's pretty dope, right? That's like, I want to see that. Don't come up to me with this statement, right? This specific statement that I'm going to say, no, that means that you know, this is my idea, right? Come up with your own. All right. So we take that statement and we have to go to a question here. I don't know if I'm going to move myself here. There you go. You go from a question, and if you were in the room after, in the breakout room during honor seminar, then you already know how to do this, or have already kind of gotten like a quick rundown of what this is. A question does not start off with any other words except for this, right? Yes, you can have other types of questions that say, does the crow Does the crow cry at midnight? Something like that. Those type of questions, do, did, do, does, I'm sorry, those are yes no questions. And you don't want any question that's a yes no question. You always want a question that is going to garner additional information. Because if you're going to you have a yes no question, then you have to follow it up anyway with a question that begins with one of these six words, right? So just start off with this. So you need the five W's and one H method. And that means that your questions will begin with one of these words, either the word who, what, where, when, why, or how. This is an old journalism trick, by the way. Journalists know this. They never ask a question, newspaper reporters never ask a question that doesn't start with that. All right. So if you're going from a statement that tells you something, and then the whole idea of research is to answer a question, almost like a hypothesis, then you need to formulate a question. And you use these questions. One exercise that we did is that we kept asking questions until we felt like we got a question that we felt that kind of encapsulated and kind of gelled to what we thought would be a good question or the direction we wanted to go. So you want to brainstorm several questions. You just don't want one question, say, okay, this is the question I want to use. You brainstorm a couple of questions and see which one feels pretty good, right? So let me move myself again. Okay. So using all of those words, I created a couple of questions here that um go from this research statement. Remember this research statement about Afrofuturism, and creates questions. So let's look at the first one. How does Afrofuturism literature raise questions about equality, thus showing the work that still needs to be done? That's a really not a bad question, right? Because your research is the answer. Your research is the answer, right? Let's try another one, because again, you want to brainstorm several questions in that vein, and you want to use as many of those who, what, where, when, why, how um, words, right? So the one is why. Why does Afrofuturism literature raise questions about equality between Black cultures and the world? And you see how, like, almost with each question, you kind of like you're still rephrasing certain words, like certain words leave and they come back. You're kind of like, it's almost like you have a lump of clay and you're chiseling out the form, right? You're chiseling out what you don't need, or you're putting stuff back that you need. So you're molding things, you're chiseling things out, you're working things, right? This is where you should be right now with your research. Right? So we haven't talked about going into a database. We haven't talked about learning what keywords are and doing keyword searches. We haven't talked about MLA. We haven't talked about any of that. This is very, very basic. We're going to talk about all that this semester, and you are going to wish you're back here, right? So let's go with for the next one. When did Afrofuturism literature begin raising questions about equality between Black cultures and the world? That's interesting. As a literary person who reads Afrofuturism, that's an interesting question. Who are the Afrofuturism writers that raise questions about Black equality between cultures? Another who could be, who are the characters that Afrofuturism writers depend on to raise the questions about Black equality between cultures? So you can do that. Another one. What questions about equality does Afrofuturism bring up about Black equality between cultures? Where is the audience for Afrofuturism, and how does it impact related issues raised about equality between cultures? I kind of cheated on the last one because it's really two questions in one, but they kind of fit together, so I put them together. You see how we just we didn't research, sorry, we just revised a question. We just said, all right, we're going to use the word why. How can we use the word why? What do we want to know? We're going to use who. Okay, What do we want to know about the Who? The writers, the characters, the players, the secondary characters. What do we want to talk about? All right. So these are all really good questions. And then the thing um, about writing down a bunch of questions is that you can pick the one that resonates with you the most, right? And that you don't have to, you're not married to the question. Because if you're researching and you're like, this isn't great, you got like five other questions that you can try to find the answers to. And that your research is, since it's aligned with the same topic, it's probably helping you to answer those questions as well. So you're not doing the same thing twice. Okay, so let's talk about how we need to be careful here. Um, Again, you don't want a question that you can answer with a yes or no, or a question that's easily answered with a quick Google search or looking in a dictionary or looking in the database, because that means you're just not going to get off page one. You, you're you're not going to get off page one, and you're not going to have enough in your research to answer the question. So you've got to have one of those words there. So, um, why do you want to go from a statement to a question? Because the whole idea, again, of research is to answer the question. The whole idea of curiosity is that you're answering a question. And, haha, later on, you don't do the same thing twice because your thesis directly answers the question. There you go. If is your mind blown, it should be blown right now. It should You should be thinking this is amazing. It is amazing. All right. So that's the whole thing, right? That your thesis answers the question. So going back to these questions, right? Maybe we take the first one and it says, how does Afrofuturism literature raise questions about equality, thus showing the work that still needs to be done? And then you're reading, you're annotating, you're doing the research, and then you're ready to write your thesis, right? You're writing your working thesis because, again, this is a working question, and for a working question needs a working thesis. But we're not there yet. Don't jump ahead. But say you're doing a working thesis, then you can say, this is how da, 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 done, right? So I have to talk about the process of research here, because what I don't want you to do is, um, I don't want a couple things to happen. I don't want an email at 2 in the morning where you're crying or worried or anxious, and like that email is like a shot in the dark and you don't know about your life. You're having an existential crisis. I don't do well with those emails. Do not send me those emails. I'm telling you now, because if you send me those emails, I'm going to feel a certain type of way and you're going to get a certain type of email. So let's calm down. Right. So, one. Two, you understand that the process of research unfolds in front of you, right? You cannot go in there saying, I'm going to find out X. Um, you are, or, and kind of holding on to that theory and not being able to change. Research changes, or the research process changes your research question and sometimes even your theory. So sometimes what you think is going to be the thing isn't the thing. That's okay. You know what that is? That's life. Life is like that. If research is not a metaphor for life, I don't know what to tell you. Um, so your question, your research question, that wonderful question that you brainstormed with the five W's and the H, that's gonna change. Because at this point it's still rather general, but that's okay. It should be changing because as you are looking at these pieces, as you are annotating these pieces, as you talk about these pieces, as we talk about them through memos, right? We have five memos that we have to do. Will probably be like more than five, officially five, but like, oh, revise this memo since things have changing, right? Um, and we have conversations that we'll have through office hours. Your question's going to change, and that's perfectly fine. Like, that's okay. Love it. Um, right now, it's okay if your topic or your idea or your research statement is general. The process is going to help narrow it. I'm going to help you narrow it. It will be narrowed. By spring break, you're going to be like, okay, I have such a better idea of what I'm going to do, and this is going to be amazing. I hope you say it's amazing. You will probably think this is awful. Why? I think it's going to be amazing. I've already heard a couple of you guys give me your thoughts on what you're going to do, and I'm already just very excited to see what comes of it. You also have to do something. You've probably heard about this phrase. If you haven't, you're going to hear it now. Trust the process. You got to trust it. Because the process is good. The process is solid. The process works. You need to trust the process. Because the millisecond you stop trusting the process, then you're going to give me an email at 2 in the morning. You're going to be crying. Trust the process. Don't send me emails at 2 in the morning crying. Don't do that. I do not respond well. I've said this 3 times now. Please don't do that. The first person who does that, I'm going to put you on blast. I promise. I won't. But I will. I don't know. We'll see. All right. That's the end of the presentation there. Really, I hope you got what you needed. Going from a research statement, really a mission statement is what it is, to an actual question. That's the process that you're going to do this week. You're going to actually put that even in your memo. I hope that you've actually read the assignment sheet for the memo for the week. Um, Please write it as a form of a letter. You can write it as a form of a letter. I actually enjoy it when students actually write, say, Dear Professor Fernandez, and just write it in first person. It is not a freaking paper and it's not a journal. Those things are coming, but your memos really is just a conversation between me and you, a written conversation between me and you on the process of your research. It updates me on what you're doing. And then as you're doing, if I'm seeing some issues, I can help guide you away from that. So you've got to be truthful. You've got to be honest, even if all you're going to write, even if what you write is like, I am scared and I have no idea what I'm doing, but this is what I think I need to be doing. I would rather you write that than tell me everything's okay. And here comes midterms and spring break. And you're just like, no, nothing is okay. Nothing will ever be okay ever again. And then we have this spiral that I have to get you out of. So be honest in these memos. Okay, that's all I got for you. I hope that you guys have some fantastic questions and thoughts and comments for me for our one-on-ones this week. I will see you later. Bye.